All right, so we're here with Tafar. Welcome, dude. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Thanks for having me on. Of
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Uh,
course, of course.
so obviously, you have a lot of background with Powder Toast Man and Michelangelo in particular for this game. How
hmm
did you get into Nick Brawl? Where's your fighting game background and platform fighter experience kind of come from prior?
let's see. So I started playing platform fighters back with Melee. Obviously, as a kid, everybody played Smash when they were younger. But competitively, I started in 2015. I got into it like at the end of 2014 because I watched the documentary. Um,
Same here.
yep. And yeah, so I played Melee competitively for a couple of years. I took a little bit of a hiatus just because it's hard to get integrated into a scene when you're like so young compared to the rest of everybody.
hmm
Because at the time I was only like 13, 14. Um, and then let's see, in 2020, I played a little bit of Project Plus. I got pretty good at that, but didn't really stick around for too long because um, there was no local scene at that time. So I was just kind of playing without a goal. And then besides that, a couple years prior, I got into Ultimate. So I was just kind of playing Ultimate just to have something to play in, something to compete in. And then one of my friends from the Ultimate scene was like, "Hey, yo, did you hear that Nickelodeon is releasing a new platform fighter?" And I was like, "Oh shit, no, I didn't." So that's how it started. And I found out that Powder Toast Man was in the game, and and he had like a shine, and a
Yeah.
shine that sent at like a diagonal angle, kind of similar to Project M Wolf.
hmm
And Wolf was my main in Project M, so naturally the character was made for me.
Yeah. And you played Fox, right, in Melee, so Shine
Yeah,
carried over from there too.
yeah, I just like characters that have shines.
Was it difficult for you kind of getting into? I know you were saying that there was some, like, what were the difficulties with being so young? Because I know that, like, my younger brother was still, like, in late high school when he was trying to get into the scene, and there
Mhm.
was some, like, resistance from my parents, just having him show up at tournaments where pretty much most of the field is college students or older, just straight up adults with a full time job and everything, right? Like,
Yeah,
so there was a little bit
uh, I
of
didn't
hesitancy there.
I didn't really have any problem as far as, like, from my parents or anything with playing the game. It's mostly just, like, the social part of it, you know? It's like you're so much younger than the rest of the scene. It's hard
Sure.
to, like, become friends with anybody and, like, talk about things that aren't just the video game. And then obviously you can't, like, go over to anybody's house without it being, like, a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Uh So, it's just kinda hard to stay into the game when you don't have, like, a community around it to keep you there.
How did you find out? Because, like, I know you said, was it just straight at the documentary? Like, how did you find your local scene? Like, how did you kind of connect to that?
Um, yeah, that's a really good question. I think I just looked up Oregon Melee probably
Mm,
at some point, and then I found the Facebook group because that's how everybody found each other back
yeah,
then. Let's see the Facebook groups. I don't know if it's still like that. I feel like people still use Facebook for Melee, but that's how it was back then. You find the Facebook group, and then you find whichever local is closest to you, and then boom, there you go. Now you're playing
yeah,
Melee.
yeah. That was like that was like when Smash Boards was kind of starting to not be as prevalent. I know that that was like
Yeah.
originally the thing, and then it was every local scene started having Facebook groups pop up. So that
Yeah,
makes
you
sense.
watch the documentary and then you're like, "Oh, splash boards. I wonder if that's still a thing." And then
It
it's
was,
like not really. So then you find like Facebook groups instead.
yeah. So for I know that California obviously not too far compared to maybe if you were on the East Coast or something, but like how much was that for Genesis? Was that really like your first like major? I don't know how much like traveling you've done prior to larger events.
Yeah, I've been in the scene like forever, but that was my first time going to like a real super major.
hmm
I went to Port Priority 6, I think it was the latest one. Whichever one had Nick at it just last year.
hmm
Um But I mean, compared to Genesis, that thing was like nothing. It already felt like a regional, having been to like other bigger events that were like within my state and even out of state. So it wasn't anything crazy, but Genesis was bigger than I'd expected.
Yeah, how was that experience? Kind of, I know that you were at Pin Temple prior, and that kind
Mm.
of had a more close knit feel with some of the members of the community, and then you had everyone kind of come back from that event, and then obviously there was a ton more players coming in. I know that for me it was kind of striking that there was like a very significant portion of like Switch players or just like people who were exclusively on other consoles and only played LAN weren't really integrated with the online community, and it was surprising to me how many people were still like passionate about the game, but pretty much were
Yeah.
relatively unknown. I think to a lot of the people who were in like the Nick Brawl like grinders Discord and stuff like that. Was that
Yeah,
something
it's
that kind of
interesting.
jumped out? Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, my favorite part about going to in-person tournaments, anyways, is getting to meet people and like
Mhm.
hang out with people, socializing. So getting to meet all these people that were into the game that we don't know exist because like since Nick Brawl is so small for the most part, if there's a scene anywhere or if anyone's playing the game, we probably know who they are.
Mhm.
But to see new faces who like are just kind of on the fringe of getting super into the game or just kind of enjoy the game on their own time, it's really nice to be able to like get to meet them, introduce them to like the core competitive scene, and just I don't know, see how they play the game.
Yeah. What do you think is the best way to kind of get those players more integrated, right? Like that for that a lot of people I think that was one of their first competitive experiences with the game specifically. How do we kind of retain those players and keep them coming back to offline stuff and maybe even try to
Yeah.
participate more with online?
The hard part is always like making somebody's path like seamless, from getting the game to playing the game to finding people to playing the game. It needs to be like easy for them to do. Otherwise, like, for most people, if they can't immediately enjoy the video game, they'll just stop playing the game or just go do something else. So it takes like individual effort from other people in the scene to go out and talk to them and to be like, hey, you should join the server, or hey, where are you from? Oh, I'm from there too. We have tournaments, or maybe we should play sometime.
Mhm.
You have to physically reach out to these people because I mean, there's a billion reasons people won't do it themselves. Like for one, people are socially awkward. They don't want to like, go reach into this group that already seems like pretty tightly knit and then just try to insert themselves there.
Yeah, sure.
Unless they're like especially like extroverted, which I mean, that's a good thing to do. It's just that like most people aren't going to do that for themselves.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
then also obviously if the pathway isn't clear to them, it's like, oh, if I talk to this guy, he'll invite me to a server and then I can find people who play the game in my area. It's like if they don't know that, then they'll they'll just take the path of least resistance.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What do you think? I guess if you're trying to appeal to players that maybe were maybe trying it at the beginning or didn't give it much of a chance or have just kind of heard about the game but not really played firsthand, I think we'll talk a little bit more about things that the game can improve on. But what do you think that Nick Brawl in particular does really well that would appeal to players over say other platform fighters or fighting games in general?
I think the biggest thing is that it's like really easy to get started playing. Like the execution barrier in this game is like pretty low. But it's like just about as satisfying as playing like melee because in melee you get to move super fast. You have all these movement options available to you, like wave dashing, wave landing, yada yada. And in Nick Brawl, you have mostly the same tools minus like a couple like moonwalking and some other random niche tech. But the execution is like way easier. Like there's no jump squat that you have to worry about. Like wave dashing is bufferable, wave landing like snaps you to the platform. Like everything is very easy in terms of execution, but still feels really good to do. So I think if you want like a fast-paced platform fighter, if you like air dashing, if you like moving around quickly, and you don't have the time to sit down for hours and hours and grind tech, just to get into playing the game at a basic level, then I think Nick is definitely if it fits that niche.
Yeah, I know a lot of people in the Discord were trying to give Melee a shot, and that was the thing that was like the most daunting was just getting stuck in their movement, various jump squats between characters, and it was just hard
Yeah.
to pick up at first, just to even try to keep up with other players. So, yeah, I think it does a really good job of appealing to beginners. Just it does you don't really you don't have that issue of really getting stuck in your movement too often. You don't have the like spacey accidentally SDing and stuff a bunch like that. Like that doesn't really happen too much, I feel like, in the game, which is
Yeah.
definitely nice to pick up.
You make that jump of like player versus player much sooner than you do in like melee because you're still fighting the engine in melee. And
Yeah,
even in ultimate you have to fight against the engine because your movement is so restricted.
sure. Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense. Um So I guess with your experience in particular, I know that this patch was a little rough for someone who played a lot of PTM.
Yeah.
Uh, but I know that you've talked in the past that you felt like the aerial upstrong was something that needed to be nerfed, that needed to be toned back. Do you feel like
Mhm.
that it was executed well, or like do you think that the nerf was appropriate, or was there still issues with the character that needs to be
Um,
redesigned a little bit to balance it out?
he's just kind of in an awkward spot because, like, obviously that tongue was ridiculous. It didn't need to be killing certain characters at like 0%, but the fact that like Zim can be living past like 90% off of the lick is a little absurd because that is such a drastic jump. And then on top of that, clanking went away, and clanking was like an enormous help to Powder Toast Man because ordinarily heavy characters in this game have just absolutely terrible dog water disadvantage states, and they do. Powder Toast Man has a terrible one without clanking, because before you could just press nair and then get out of disadvantage, get back to the ground, and then get back in your opponent's face. He was a very like in your face rush down type character, at least the way that I played him in the previous patches. And now that risk reward is not there for you to be able to do that, because if you get grabbed, if you get hit, you could just die for it. Especially now that people are just better at edge guarding Powder Toast Man.
Mhm.
So I mean, the tongue nerf was good. It should have happened, but I think it got nerfed too hard, and then they didn't give enough power or like any power back to Powder Toast Man. Um, because I guess they forgot to consider how important clanking was to him. Because I think for him, like clanking was probably more important than for any other character.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that the clanking change in general is like a game mechanic, going from that to just a general hitbox, hurtbox spacing type of thing? Do you think that that was better for the game regardless, and but that they need to rework how certain characters disjoints to balance things out, or did you kind of enjoy the way that clanking interacted in the game?
I mostly didn't really have a problem with clanking because like it's a strong option, so people are going to do it. So then obviously you can just play around it by like waiting for them to land with a move instead. But I think it's probably better overall because it's a little bit hard to digest coming from like another platform fighter. Like, oh, your disadvantage state is going to end here, or like you have to respond in these ways now to them being able to clank out of your combos. And I think that just is like really weird and like dissatisfying for someone that comes from like melee or even ultimate, where like your defensive options either don't really exist and you're in hit stun, or your defensive option is an air dodge that still can leave you in disadvantage and not like suddenly lead to a reversal. So I feel like it's just kind of like a messy mechanic that's also hard to balance. So I think it's probably better that it's just gone.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Where are you at with like the current patch as a whole? I know we kind of just talked about the clanking in particular, but obviously there's been a ton of changes with them nerfing reaction tech chasing and nerfing the ability to just carry people off with a bunch of down airs, whether they're light airs or strong airs. They kind of nerf those across the board. Do you feel like the general game engine is in like a pretty good spot then? Or and it's just more of a character balancing issue, or is there still some stuff that you want to see change with the basic game mechanics and engine?
Yeah, I think the engine is headed in a good direction, especially knowing what the changes are going to be next patch, where they're removing hit stun, your momentum canceling.
Mhm.
Um, because I mean, for the most part, I like the feel of the game, and I think that the pacing is going in a pretty good direction now that like not every character is just has like down throw dare as an option or dash attack, reaction tech chase dare. I think if anything, I would like to see tech chasing become a little bit easier because I think it's too hard at this point, and I liked tech chasing.
Mhm.
I think if it was just like maybe a couple frames slower on either the roll or like the neutral getup, it would be in a perfectly fine spot. Especially now that you can't like dash attack dare as most characters. I think it's fine if some characters have dash attack dare or like double dare or whatever as a tool, but like not everybody needs to have it.
Yeah. Is there any concern with balancing? I know that like tech chasing is a difficult thing to balance just because you have such a significant portion of the tournaments and stuff that are online where connection makes that like extra difficult, whereas maybe LAN where a little bit easier to react to stuff offline. Like, is it tough to like where do you look at the balance? Like, if you give it a few more frames to account for high ping or rollbacks and stuff like that, then it might become more feasible online. But then maybe it's too easy on land. Like, is that something that like where do you think the balance should be, especially since I feel like there's a good amount of, like I said, is online right now.
Yeah, that's an awkward topic to dance around because
Yeah.
like obviously ideally you don't want the game to only exist online, but realistically that's where it is right now,
Hmm.
save for like whenever we go to majors. And there are noticeable differences with offline and online play. Like offline, if you hit somebody with something that is not safe on block, like if it's -8, it's going to get punished like 9 times out of 10. And then online, you can get away with so much like mashing that you wouldn't be able to do offline. Like the game just feels like totally different in terms of like if not game fuel, at least like a risk reward and the decisions that you make like passively.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, I think the game should be balanced towards offline play, uh, and online is just gonna have to be the victim.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fair. With some of the, I guess, kind of switching to the character stuff, obviously with right now, I feel like most people would agree that it's a very top heavy cast, but that the rest of the cast I think is actually a lot closer than people think. Like a lot of the worst characters in the game really aren't that far from maybe some of the characters that fall a little bit short of,
Yeah.
I guess, whatever you would consider top four, top five, depending on how far deep you want to go. Uh, is it a matter of bringing those characters up right now from the bottom and matching those, or would you rather just see them tone down some of the top tiers like April, Zim, Shredder, Nigel, stuff like that?
Yeah, I 100% think that the top tiers need to be toned down. Because Nigel can play like a pretty lame, uninteractive style where it's like, okay, I'm constantly at like losing a risk reward potential exchanges with this character, and then if he touches me one time, I can just die because he
Mhm.
has like the Nair drag down stuff that you can't like DI out of. His up air chains are pretty degenerate. Um, April can blow up some characters off of like one grab. She does up throw, aerial down strong, regrab, up throw, up strong, and boom, you just got shine licked. Uh,
Yeah.
and then Zim is just like annoying. He's like uninteractive. You don't really want a zoner to be like your top tier.
Mhm.
Sorry, because you're a
No,
Zim
no,
main,
I understand.
but
No, I
that's
get
just
it.
facts. And then Shredder is a whole can of worms of a character. Mostly it's that Nair and that side B. Um, so I mean, like, yeah, each of those characters, like to me, is like, wow, this is degenerate. I don't want characters to be like this because this is just annoying to play against.
Mhm.
And then everybody else is like fine, save for like Michelangelo, who I think just absolutely obliterates some characters like way too hard,
Mm.
and then is like for the rest of the cast a pretty average character, but then still gets shit on by like the top tiers.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess moving forward, right, we've already had a lot of patches. Are you concerned with how the game's direction is going to look as a game that's going to be patched often, coming from someone who played a lot of melee or Smash in general? There was patches, but I think the game, especially with melee, obviously the game hasn't changed in 20 years. So the shift for someone that comes from melee in particular, it's been weird. Every month, every 2 months, we see like a pretty drastic shift. Is there a concern with how you feel as a player, but also just how it affects other members of the community? I know that there's some people who get kind of disaffected where they see their own character nerfed or a mechanic that they really liked. I know that some people really loved being able to drag people off the bottom with down air and are like, I kind
Yeah.
of want that back. So, uh, is that something that you're worried about, maybe fracturing the community or like affecting your own interest in the game?
Um. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I was really sad when Powder Toast Man just got nerfed because I mean, so the nerfs are necessary, but like when it doesn't all happen at the same time to like the same degree for like the rest of the cast that needs
Mhm.
like these changes, it's just kind of like annoying as a competitor.
Mhm.
I mean, just a couple weeks prior to Genesis, like, hey, your character sucks now,
Mhm.
but everybody else is fine. It's just like as a competitor, kind of honestly really discouraging. Um, but for the future of the game, it's just it's just one tournament, it's one patch. I foresee it as being healthier
Mhm.
in the long term because it's something that'll need to happen. Little. Okay, that's my mom. So yeah, it's something that needs to happen. I think that it's fair to say that there are things in the game that like shouldn't exist, like Nigel being able to nair wobble you,
Mhm.
Shredder's nair and side B existing in the state that they exist in. Um, but I do think that we need to give the game at some point some time to develop its meta, because
Mhm.
like if knowing what we know now about like some character specific tech, how to use throws effectively. Like the last patch could have looked entirely different in terms of balancing, or of like what people would order on the tier list. So the meta is absolutely subject to change based just on time and development. But there are things that I think objectively you can consider to some degree unfun and degenerate that should be changed.
Yeah, I know. Talking to Bodidi previously, he was kind of saying echoing what you were saying, where it's like with what we know now, if you put that player base in a different patch, right, from a few months ago, there was probably characters and combos and stuff like that that we probably just straight up missed entirely.
Oh
Where
yeah,
those
for
might
sure.
have been, there might have been broken characters that we considered low tier, and we'll never get to see what those characters were capable of because they're just kind of in the past now, and we just have this current version. Do you have like a? I know you were talking about some of the top tiers with talking about Shredder Nair and Side B in particular, but obviously Nigel's Nair. Is there, if you had like a top three moves in particular or something, or like just changes to a character mechanics, like what's kind of like on your wish list if you were to be able to just kind of flip the switch and those things are in the game now or not in the game now?
Okay. Okay. So April simply, I mean, I already kind of know what's gonna happen to her, but her Aerial Downstrong needs to get like cut in half. That thing does way too much damage. It comes out too fast. And then her Upstrong, just like why is it just pre-patch PTM Upstrong?
Mm.
That's also faster. Like that move is Shine Lake, bro. Uh,
Yeah.
so I mean, those are the two changes I would make to April. I think the rest of her is like pretty much mostly fine. Also, just like make it so that she can't stall like infinitely in the air. Make her up B cap out at like 5 uses in the air before she touches the ground or something. Um, Zim's Nair, he shouldn't be able to throw out like two in a single full hop. That move needs to have like more end lag because it's like way too non-committal
Mhm.
for like how much defensive reward there is for just like throwing it out. Like you can just beat some characters by just spamming Nair because that move is like so unapproachable and like so unpunishable,
Yeah.
and the risk reward is just so drastically in your favor for using that move.
Hmm.
Um, Nigel, nerf the snap, uh, nerf the the fucking up air, and make it so that he can't just like nair wobble you. That shit is so stupid. And then I guess if you hurt his kill power a bit and like he dies earlier, then he's fine.
Hmm.
Um, and then who else is there? Shredder. See, that nair genuinely needs to be like a quarter of the size it is. Like that move is akin to like Project M Wolf or like Zetterburn nair, and it's
Hmm.
like triple the size.
Yeah.
And then side B is like Fox Illusion on crack and comes out like twice as fast with like 5 times the reward.
Yeah.
Uh, and then who is there a character I'm missing? Zim, April, Shredder, Nigel. Yeah, that's
Those
it.
are that's pretty much, yeah, I think that's like the conventional top four. I've heard now it's weird where we had SpongeBob kind of like consistently people thought was the top two, top three character, and we're like we SpongeBob needs to be nerfed, and then now it's like character should be balanced in the way that SpongeBob is. I've heard like people kind of say that. Do you kind of agree with that sentiment
Yeah,
with
because
the yeah.
I think before SpongeBob just kind of had he took advantage of like reaction tech chasing and what's the other one like yeah, just reaction tech chasing and like down throw dare like very effectively,
Mhm.
or like dash attack dare, compared to the rest of the cast because his jab was so good. And then on top of that, he would wobble like heavy characters. And if you couldn't wobble a character because they're too light, then you just get jab reaction tech chase. And I mean, just surely without being able to like dash attack dare people as consistently and reaction tech chase them, he is like a character that feels pretty normal. He's
Mhm.
obviously strong at something, has tools to approach other matchups, but isn't like polarizingly strong versus like any character.
So
At least I think.
yeah, so I know that right now, obviously, you're concerned with PTM's general strength has kind of pushed you. It seems like a little bit more toward Mikey, but there was like a pretty good. I think you still pretty much play both, and you were using both at Genesis. Is when you approach being like a dual main in a sense, like is it what are the challenges kind of associated with that, and do you think that ultimately in a game that's like relatively underdeveloped, do you think that that's like an effective way, because we have people on both sides, right, who are just like, this is the character I play and I play them in every matchup, but
Hmm.
obviously having catching people off guard or having characters cover other matchup deficiencies that your other main might not is definitely a plus in a lot of ways. So like, how do you kind of see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to a player to player thing for me because versus Jut, I decided to play only Powdered Toast Man, and then versus Waldo, I decided to only play Mikey. And for me, it just comes down to like how well practiced do I think this person is against this character, and how well do I feel that my game plan with each of these specific characters will do into them.
Mhm.
Um, I think that especially with the characters that I play who have such polarizing matchups sometimes, it is definitely worth the effort of learning and using those two characters over trying to stick through a really bad matchup with like Mikey or Powder Toast Man. Like, I mean, right now they kind of suffer the same fate versus like the top tiers, but I think Powder Toast Man does really well into April. So for me, as much as I lean more towards Mikey right now, there is no reason for me to play Mikey into April when I already have PTM so well developed, and I think that the matchup is better for PTM.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, yeah, I think it will depend on like patch to patch and whatever, but I don't think it hurts to main two characters.
Is there an interest in wanting to pick up additional characters to go from two to three or to four, or do you feel like if either it's unnecessary or maybe too challenging to balance like having that much need to practice so
Mhm.
many different characters?
I don't think it's too hard to play multiple characters. I mean, Lily does it too. She plays like three different characters: Oblina, SpongeBob, and some other one that I'm forgetting. Garfield.
Garfield, yeah.
And yeah, I have a Danny Phantom right now that I've been working on. So at some point, I'll probably pull him out in bracket. He's mostly my answer to like Nigel more than anything, and then I think he might do better than my other characters versus Shredder. I don't know. We'll see next patch.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, it depends on how I feel, what the matchups look like. But I do have three characters ready. It's possible though next patch we're probably only going to see my Powder Toast Man, um, and maybe a
Gotcha.
couple Mikeys here and there.
Gotcha. And so we have a question in chat, like just as a general mindset thing, what do you do to kind of combat getting tilted or to be able to stay in a positive mindset and as a player? I know that Genesis, you had some pretty close sets that didn't quite go your way. How do you kind of recoup and refocus your mentality a little bit in tournament?
Um, that's a tough question. You have to take some of the stake away from the outcome of the game. The results of the game shouldn't matter too much to you. It's obviously good, I think, to be passionate and to like want to win because I think the only way you can truly get better and overcome some of the challenges with whatever you want to do is to want the end goal bad enough. Because I mean, I wouldn't be putting up with Nigel or Shredder or whatever if I didn't want to win at the game bad enough. I would simply go do other things with my life.
Hmm.
Um, so you need to find a balance with like how badly do I want to win? How do I feel about the outcome of this game? And then what can I do beyond the game to give myself some satisfaction and validation in life? Because if you balance too much of your happiness and satisfaction on the outcome of a game, and then the game doesn't go the way that you want it to, it's gonna fuck you up. So pick up some other hobbies, go to the gym, uh, do some things beyond the game to give you some dopamine and satisfaction. Because putting too much stake and too much reliance on a game to make you happy is not healthy. But besides that, other things you can do for yourself are like when you get frustrated, just tell yourself it's okay. The outcome of this match doesn't matter. I can learn from this, have a growth mindset, you know, just remind yourself that a loss or whatever doesn't mean much in the end of the day. It's a video game. Um, it's something that I do for fun. I'm here to hang out with my friends. I'll learn from this and get better. Those are all better ways to look at a loss than maybe self-reflecting and being like, I'm wasting my time or I suck at this or whatever. Those are common things that people say to themselves that make them mad whenever they lose at a game.
Yeah, sure. And I feel like it's probably, especially like we said, the game is mostly online, but I feel like, at least for me, it's almost easier to have a positive mindset in person tournaments. Like if you're going to a major or something, like
Yeah.
you're surrounded by people, so you can you can easily distract yourself or go in, go and just sit in the crowd and spectate one of the stream matches or something like that. But online, it's like you're already kind of isolated, and
Yeah.
you just have to kind of eat it in silence in your room, just kind of let
Yeah.
it dwell a little bit. So
Plus there's the like social aspect of like being around other people. So you don't want to be you don't want to like be molding in front of
mhm.
people. So it kind of, you know, it reminds you to behave a certain way. When you're alone, you don't really have as many of those reminders, so you'll just like act on impulse.
Mhm.
But I think being around people gives you those reminders, like, hey, don't act this way. And that's generally pretty deeply built into you. Like, I'm not gonna yell and stomp or whatever while I'm out in public. But
Some
when you're
people do.
alone, yeah, some people do. But yeah, you know, you just gotta take some agency sometimes and remind yourself to behave a certain way, and you'll end up feeling better at the end of the day for doing it.
Yeah. And kind of along those lines, like just in general, as far as like preaching a good mindset, I know that obviously you do coaching. I've been a student a couple of times in the past already, leading into
Yes, sir.
Genesis. Uh, how did you kind of decide that that was something you wanted to do? Like, obviously, if you're just playing with other people with friends, I think people are always cool with just giving more casual advice to players and being like, oh, you can do this to beat this option. But going into coaching requires a lot more preparation and is a little bit of a different animal. So how did you kind of stumble into wanting to do that, especially for a pretty nuanced, smaller community game with Nick Brawl?
Yeah. I've always just kind of enjoyed teaching people things. Like when I am knowledgeable at a topic, it gives me personal satisfaction to teach other people about it. I feel like there's a pretty big knowledge gap, um, dividing like the top 10 or so players from like everybody else in the community. Because we tend to play with each other a lot and we'll share information with each other a lot. And like, it's not like we want to hide stuff from the community or like other players, especially me, because I'm obviously a coach in Metafy. So if somebody reaches out to me and wants to learn something, I'll teach it to them. Um, so that's part of why I opened up my Metafy is because I think there's a pretty big divide. And I think that if you simply get enough coaching from somebody who knows significantly more than you about the game, you will just automatically get better. So I want to help other people get better at the game because I think it'll make, you know, the competition more exciting, and I think it's just better for the scene overall for people to have the knowledge be shared to them, and to, you know, make tournaments more exciting so you don't see the same people winning over and over.
And when you were kind of going into coaching, obviously, just because someone's good at the game doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a great coach. And even if they're not a great player, sometimes people who just kind of play it at a more I don't know if casual levels, but more of a like a middle level, quite not a top
Mhm.
player, are actually like really strong coaches. So like, what did you find rewarding about? I know you kind of wanted to just improve the scene in general, but was there anything that you found particularly difficult that when you went into coaching you were just like, oh, this is actually hard to prep for specific topics or characters maybe that you aren't as familiar with?
Um, yeah, I guess when it's a character I don't necessarily play, it's harder for me to have specific answers. But I mean, I go out of my way to go study like VODs to see like how people approach certain situations with their characters. Like I had to coach a Ren and Stimpy player, and obviously I don't play Ren and Stimpy,
Hmm.
so I just had to play some games with Blazing Pasta and watch some of his VODs to see like how he approaches, I don't know, neutral, disadvantage, especially, um, advantage, all that.
Yeah, no. And what do you think is like the best way right now to grow the game? Obviously, you've been putting out some more content. I know you've kind of
Mm.
advertised that on your Twitter. You had like a top 5 noob mistakes
Yep.
that came out recently, I think yesterday, and I know you've seen some other videos that you're working on and stuff that's upcoming. Uh, Content creation, tournament attendance, just kind of like spreading the game. Like, what do you think is the best way as the community uh, to kind of spread the knowledge and grow the scene a little bit?
Um, kind of just had to go with the wave a little bit. I think earlier when there was more hype around competing and getting better at the game, it was probably more worth my while to enter tournaments to help the scene grow because people want to like compete against specific people, and that drives people to get better. But now that we've kind of hit a stagnant point where it's like, okay, it doesn't seem like people are as hungry to try to crawl or like yeah, crawl or reach the top. How do we get people reinvigorated and reactivated to play the game again?
Hmm.
And I think right now the best angle is going with content, um, because we are seeing people drift away a little bit. And if there's any interest from people on the outside, all they're gonna find when they search Nick Brawl is not resources. It's gonna be stuff like what went wrong with Nick Brawl. Is Nick Brawl a dead game? Random like casual videos or like guides from like October.
Yeah.
Um, so I think especially with this next patch coming up along with a new character, it is 100% far more important than anything else we do, more so than having tournaments especially, is to to put out resources and have things for new players or returning players to look at so that they can get back into the game.
Yeah, those and going off that, there's two sort of bases that we can tap into, right? Where you have new players who have maybe seen the game in passing or didn't even know about the game in the first place, that could pick up the game and become new players. But then you also have like a really significant player base that picked up the game week one, played for a week, 2 weeks, maybe a month, and
Yep.
kind of drifted away, sometimes for fairly valid reasons, between the netcode obviously being an issue, and then
Mhm.
some of the general game mechanics and balance was a little bit wonky at first. So I think that pushed people away too. Which do you think is the more effective and maybe more realistic base to kind of tap into right now?
Um, I think both will get hit at the same time. I don't think you can really target one over the other because I think the narrative on Nick Brawl has kind of been like set in stone as of now. You know, like people think a specific way about Nick Brawl whether or not you've played the game before,
Mm.
and it's that netcode is broken, the game is a balanced mess, and it's janky are like the main things that people will say about the game. And as long as we can shift that narrative, whether you're a returning player or a new player, you'll go in with a different perspective or expectation of the game that'll make you more willing to try it. So I think it's important that we make content that shows how different the game is, that addresses the specific issues that people had, um, that prevented them from buying the game or stopped them from buying the game, and ways to show people that the game is cool and show off its like individuality from Smash and why we play it.
Hmm. Yeah, I know, and I think obviously you're creating more content. I know that Sanji's done like a lot of work with trying to just get top players to grind sets, so that way he's been posting a lot of those like high
Mhm.
level sets, so people can kind of just see the game in action. A lot of like YouTube VODs of tournament matches are pretty outdated. It
Yeah,
feels like, so
because
you're watching the game, you're not seeing like what the game is currently in a lot of the
yeah,
time.
there's a disconnect, like a very real disconnect from like the competitive scene to like anybody like on the subreddit or like on the main cord, like the casual side. And then even still the people who know that the competitive scene exists, they don't really know specifically who we are because there's a lack of content. VODs are like not being put up onto YouTube anywhere. And for the most part, our tournaments are like pretty low profile, save for like Hidden Temple and Genesis. It's just hard to like know who you're supposed to be looking at. Whereas I don't think that divide really exists nearly as much with like Smash because there's such an overlap with like the casual and competitive scene to at least a content degree,
Hmm.
where like you know who MK Leo is because if you want to casually get better at Smash to beat your friends, you'll look at who's the best Byleth or whatever, and you'll find MK Leo, and maybe you'll find videos about him, from him, whatever. Like their faces are there to represent the game, the character, and ours kind of just aren't because we don't have content or anyone to put our faces out there right now.
Yeah, and like for me, I 100% agree. Like one of the big reasons why I ended up switching to Zim right before going to Genesis was I was exclusively playing Helga basically for the first like 4 or 5
Hmm.
months, and I just couldn't find I couldn't find sets of people playing. Like I knew that Blackmar played, but he's done so much more for like the content creation side of the game and commentating that he ends up sitting out like a fair amount of brackets. So there's a handful of sets that you'd find of top level Helga, and then, but it's like one player, and so it's so hard. I felt like
Yeah.
to learn a character, like you were saying, like you look up the best, right now at the beginning of the game is like look up the best Leonardo player. You had like a couple of people with Thunders and UPG playing a lot, but there's definitely plenty of characters in the game that don't really have top level representation, and so it's really easy to just kind of feel like you're alone. Where it's just like how do I improve? Where's the
Yeah.
resources and stuff to get better?
Yeah, and that goes back to like the whole seamless thing of like getting people to play the game again, where it's like compared to Smash, you have like, oh, if I want to play Kirby, boom, there's like 20 billion videos by 20 billion different people on how to play Kirby. If you want to play Nick Brawl, any character, you one have to get over the hurdle of learning how to move yourself, how all the system mechanics work yourself, and then how to play your character yourself. And then you try to find matches and you get your shit beat by everybody that's been playing the game longer than you. And it's just you versus the world at that point.
Yeah.
And it's like discouraging and a gigantic hurdle to ask people to overcome just so that they can like play.
Yeah, and how important do you think it is? Like you said, we have like a ton of content that came out of Hidden Temple and Genesis in particular, and that was kind of put on like a very prominent uh, stage, especially with VODs going up and obviously the live streams. How important do you think it is for the game and for the community to have the major LAN events kind of host brackets for Nick Brawl, and how do we make that happen? I guess as a community.
I think that stuff is huge. I mean, more than anything, I saw Hidden Temple one as an opportunity for us to put our faces out there, like for people to know like who's playing the game, who's representing the characters, and like what the scene is. Um, and I think for more of that to happen, obviously we're gonna have Hidden Temple 2 at some point later this year. Um, it's just kind of gonna be a matter of circumstance, like who can we get stream rights with, how many people are going to see us? Like, is BTS going to be down to stream Nick Brawl again in the future? Who knows? Is it up to us or is it up to Game Mill to throw money at them? What events are they going to be at? Who really knows? Until then, the best we can do is make our own content and do things for ourselves. And Hidden Temple also happens to be coming from ourselves and Max, so we gotta work with whatever resources we have.
Yeah, and it's definitely it's nice at certain tournaments having the developer kind of back the tournaments and throw money at it, but there's also I think probably a need for more grassroots stuff. The way like the stuff that Max has put together obviously has
Yeah,
been really great.
and
But it's
uh,
tricky. Yeah.
as much as it helps for the developers to throw money at the game too, it's like they obviously can't do it forever. So like to at some point there needs to be some like autonomy from like other streaming platforms or not streaming platforms, but like BTS, etc., other streams and other tournaments to have the game and to show the game off. Um, because if it takes Game Mill money every single time they want Nick Brawl to be shown off, it's just not gonna return an investment at all. Um, so yeah, grassroots content helps a lot because it shows that like the money that they're using is going somewhere. Because the more we make content, the more people want to play the game. The more people that want to play the game, the more that people will stream the game. The more tournaments that'll have the game, et cetera, et cetera. All of that drives sales for the game and sales for TLC. And if we don't do our part, then Game Mill doesn't get their return on investment. And if they don't get their return on investment, they stop supporting the game. And if nobody's doing anything and Game Mill's not doing anything, then the game's gonna die.
Yeah. And I guess what's it to finish it off? What is your general message? I guess to people who are who have played the game or are thinking about playing the game, what do you tell those players who maybe are considering giving it a chance but haven't quite made that leap yet?
I would say go for it. There are plenty of people in the scene that are willing to teach you the game, myself included. Plenty of people that are willing to play with you. The game is in a much better state than it was at the beginning. So if your impression of the game is Michelangelo naring people to death, or Aang naring people to death, or Powder Toast Man killing you at 0, that is not the game anymore. You don't see reaction tech chasing anymore. The game feels like a platform fighter. It's fun. It's fast paced. I love the game. Everybody in the community is willing to share our knowledge with you and get you introduced to it. I think out of every community that I've been a part of, the Nick Brawl one has been the best. Everybody's so friendly. Everybody just loves hanging out with each other. It's always just like super nice to see everybody at IRL events. It's a great thing to be a part of. So make the leap, play the game, and grow with us. It'll be a magical experience.
Perfect. And where can people find you as far as social media? Where can they find your content and such? You can plug
Yep.
whatever.
So I have Twitter, YouTube. Those are the two main things, and a Twitch, where I stream occasionally. All of that is Tafaar _ TAFAAR _. And then I have a TikTok that doesn't have any content on it, but maybe I'll do that at some point. So I guess if you want to follow, you can do that. And then my Metafy is Tafaar without the underscore. That's the only social media platform that doesn't have the underscore. Everywhere else does.
All right, perfect. And where can what's like your next LAN event that people might be able to see turn out?
LAN event, not sure. Foreseeably, it's going to be SmashCon. Maybe something else in the summer, but I'm not sure. So until then, expect to see me at SmashCon and making more YouTube videos and playing in Thirsty Thursday.
All right, cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Subtle Spotlight. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like. You can also catch my live streams over at twitch.tv/ZSubtle. I'll be live streaming future Subtle Spotlight interviews. Be sure to tune in if you want to participate in the conversation and maybe even have one of your own questions featured in the interview. Also, which player do you want to see featured next? Leave your answer in the comments below. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone, and I'll see you next time.